And welcome back to Mixed Media Live. I am really excited for this episode because we're broadcasting to a whole new audience. Those of you on Rumble have been listening to the podcast for some time now. It's the 32nd episode. It's pretty crazy to think about, but it's been a fun journey. But it's great to see the show evolve. Definitely. I think the biggest thing I want to get out up in front is thank you to Rob Sharma, who made this possible by supporting us on Locals. It's invaluable, this kind of leap that we're taking forward because of his help, and because of that, I'll be putting a link to some of his credentials in the description of the final version of this podcast. And the other thing is, if you want to support us, we have a lot of perks. And the great news is that I'm at a point where I'm sort of taking a little bit of a pivot in my, personal filmmaking journey, my personal business journey, where I'm sort of to pivot away from freelance and towards a little bit more of a, I would say like audience building mode that I'm gonna go into. So I'm excited for the channel because of that. I'm gonna be freeing up some time for myself because of that, which is nice. So expect improvements sooner than I usually say. Which is to say, sometimes I say I'll do something, it'll take me a month for it to actually show up on the podcast. But yeah, who is Mixed Media? What is Mixed Media? Mixed Media is a weekly live podcast. It's like a radio show that appears every Friday at 7 p.m. on YouTube, Rumble, and Twitch. So shout out to the YouTube and Twitch out there as well. You guys are awesome. And what we do is we talk about all things art. We each come at it from our particular interests. So film, gaming, and music tends to be the biggest things. We also talk about general things like art business, art philosophy, practically anything. We react to your stuff, and that's what we're going to be doing today. Today we'll be reacting to your hot takes on Reddit, as well as reviewing an indie composer's music, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, without further ado, I guess we'll introduce ourselves. So my name is Irving. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella. If you can see there, I've got an Ariella sweatshirt right there. I always got to rep my company when I'm on stream. So you can go to my website and check out my stuff. Ben, who are you?
I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and a media composer.
Yeah, and usually we have a third with us. My brother, Nathan Nestor, he's in college, so he's a little bit inundated. I think he has something like 3 exams tomorrow or something like that. So I know how that feels like. And yeah, we decided to cut him some slack today. So wish him luck. So yeah, I guess we'll start with Ben's segment. I don't think I have much else to say in the intro. We'll just hop right into the review. And I'll just change the plate. So yeah, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, so we haven't done a review of someone's art in a little while. So I looked around on the usual Reddit sites that I've combed through before, and it's one piece that I found. It's called a track called Sunshine and Lasers by Nick O'Brien. And I'm not sure if Nick is listening to the show or not. If you are, you're welcome to comment on anything I say. You can comment in the live chat. If not, we'll just keep going. So this is a short track, and believe it is billed as a kind of adventure theme for an RPG game. It's pretty short, so we can just listen to the whole thing. So if you want to pull that up, Irving.
Yes, I will do so now. Give me 1 second. Let's see. Oh, wrong thing. There we go. And I'll play it with audio. There we go.
Is it just on my end that it's not playing?
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's ended on my side at least. Um, yeah, I'll just chime in with my quick, uneducated thoughts. there's quite a
Sure.
there's quite a journey there. I really liked the journey from front to end. Definitely, yeah, a lot of variations on a theme, but still interesting nonetheless from front to back. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, your opinion is pretty, you know, I'm not gonna say more valuable than mine, but you're more familiar with the video game and RPG world than I am, and of course, Nathan certainly is. Unfortunately, Nathan is not here to give
Yeah,
his thoughts on it. So, yeah, I'll say up front that like my experience is much less in the video game world than it is in the film world. So, you know, take 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 non like purely, you know, note wise things with it with some grain of salt. Although I don't have that much to say on like the narrative front. I think overall it's a really nice track. It's very light overall, even when you get large. And I mean, maybe light isn't the right word because I have some comments on you know thickness of things, but um, maybe we should say I'll say like kind of clarity of texture. Like there are very few things going on, and they're all very well defined. Even when it gets larger and louder, and that, you know it can be a good trait. It depends on what you're looking for. Um, and I tend to like writing in that kind of lighter manner as well. I think it works here. Is a lot that's kind of, at least to me, reminiscent of Desplat and some of his, you know, film stuff. Like I'm thinking in particular of Little Women, his, you know, recent score. Well, not that recent, but right before the pandemic. I guess almost 2 years old now. But
yeah,
yeah, you know, the kind of like light string texture in some kind of, you know, 3/8 6/8 piano kind of dominating the melody, and then a couple of woodwinds and well, he doesn't use any brass in that score, but you know, kind of light wind texture, you know, along with the piano. Um, it reminds me of that. Probably not anything that you were thinking of, but that's kind of first impression that you know that I got from it. Um, but overall, very, very well put together piece. You can see that you thought about. I think the composer that mentioned thinking about looping here, and so we got that kind of repeat, and that works really well, I would say. So obviously, if you're writing for a game that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
you're making up where you want it to loop. But as a piece in itself, it works, I would say. Yeah. So the first question I would have is, do you want this to be performed like in your ideal version of this? Is the piece going to, would it be performed by live musicians or just being done by virtual instruments? Because if it is being done live, there are a couple of considerations I would want to make, and I hope that like ultimately, your goal is to have a live orchestra record music that you write. I think ultimately that's every composer's goal, even if they exist only in the virtual world, or something for composers that when you have live musicians play it, it's just so much better than anything you can do, even with the best programming. Yeah. So there are like a handful of notation things that you could look at. A few spots where you want to make sure that you're using correct, not I don't want to say beaming, but grouping of rests. But there are very few spaces where that's an issue. Just make sure that generally, if you want like 4/8 notes of rest total, right, in 6/8, if you want dotted quarter and then 1/8 rest, not just a half rest, because you're probably going to throw people off, especially if they're not playing that bar in a kind of a hemiola 3. So that happens in a couple of spots. Yeah, I would make, if you want to record this with live orchestra, I mentioned this on past shows, the importance of measure numbers and like really large measure numbers. I'm sure Irving is familiar with that. Also,
Yes.
big time signatures is useful. I'm not sure. It's a little hard to tell from the score that was, on the YouTube video, whether you just wrote flute or flutes. Because I know the very end you have flute. I guess what's flute 2 come in for like one measure and like the last measure or two. So that might be something to note too. You want two people, and note one person playing melody when you want only one person playing it. It's not obvious until the end there you want 2 flute players, but so you want to make those things obvious as possible in the score. Yeah, so one thing that I was a little confused by is I think you mentioned somewhere in one of your comments or in your description on Reddit that you're thinking of a mixture of going between Lydian and mixed Lydian, and there's certainly some mixed Lydian stuff. Although I wasn't really sure. I don't think there's anything Lydian in there. So
You want to
I'm not
explain
sure what
like
you're referring there.
somewhat what that means for people who don't know?
Sure. So kind of in traditional Western theory, there are the 7 church modes, or not church modes, well, Greek modes as well. Ostensibly, they're based on ancient Greek scales, which probably not actually true. They're all named after different places and other ancient Greek things, and so it's probably somewhat of an invention of the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. That these trying to draw some kind of seemingly legitimate connection to Greece, but basically the simplest way to think about them is if you just take any scale, right? If you take like the white notes on a piano, okay, and you start on the pitch C and go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? The next highest C. That would be the first mode. And technically the church modes are slightly different. So in the Middle Ages, but for our purposes, right, these modes, so all the white notes C to C would be the first mode, or the Ionian mode. Dorian mode is the same notes, but you start on D. So, the pitch center is D instead of C, and, the scale is D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. Phrygian would start on E, with this focus being on E. So Mixolydian would be starting on scale degree 5, and Lydian starting on scale degree 4. And the characteristic sounds of Mixolydian being like a major scale, but with a flat 7, and the Lydian being a major scale with a sharp 4. Yeah, so a lot of composers tend to think in terms of these modes, especially if they're not thinking in terms of major, minor. So yeah, nothing wrong with not having anything Lydian, but I wasn't sure what you're referring to. I don't think there's any Lydian character in that. Yeah, so a couple of other smaller things I would note. When you have the bass come in and it's playing like those, I don't have the measure numbers because it's kind of hard to see the measure numbers on the score on YouTube. But you have the bass when it comes in kind of a larger section, and they have like those measures where they're doing D, D eighth notes, D, 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 and you have them a kind of slur mark over all of them. Do you want, the question I would have for you is, do you want the basses to play that in one bow stroke? You actually do the same thing at that part with all the strings, where they're doing the 3 quarter notes, all one bow stroke, but you want them all to be accented, which is a little bit difficult for string players to give a really hard accent if they're not giving it, rebowing. So, think about whether you actually want all that to be played in kind of one legato bow stroke, or whether you kind of what performance section you want there, because as it is, they're gonna, it's gonna be a little bit smoother than you want it to be, because they're gonna try and play in one bow stroke. Yeah. I would say, just from a purely mix standpoint, when you have the muted trumpets playing, that's pretty low in your mix, and in real life, that's probably going to be, even though they're muted, it's going to be a little bit louder than you think, especially because you have the strings in kind of a thinner, it's going to be, strings are also probably going to be louder than you imagine that they will be, which I'm going to mention in a second, but the trumpets are definitely going to be louder than they are in your mix in real life. So if you want to, make the mix a little bit more realistic, you want to bring them up, because I could barely hear them in your mix. Yeah. So in terms of the strings and the size of your ensemble, I think, so you have it, and you don't mark divisi. At least I can see it on a little score on YouTube for the violas when they're playing their kind of constant eighth note pattern pretty much throughout, except for in a really large section. So I assume you want them to be divided there, right? Have half play of a top note, half play of a bottom note, instead of doing a double stop. So it's probably polite to the players to mark that. And then I would say, I would think about the balance within that. Because if you can have all the first violins playing one pitch, all the second violins playing the next pitch, and then the, 6 violas on, if you're assuming we're like a standard size orchestra, right? You have like, 16, 14, 16 on pitch 1, highest pitch, 14, 16 on second highest pitch, 6 on the next one, and 6 on the next one. There's a big drop there, especially because you don't have anything larger, on the larger string instruments playing there underneath of them. So, I would think about the balance with that. And then I would also think, is that sound with, depending on the size of orchestra that you want, especially, but if you are going with like a full, string section, is that going to be a little bit too much for the rest of the texture with like the piano and the winds? And I think, I mentioned Desplat's Little Women score earlier, and I think that might be a good score to. I said, it's got a lot of elements that are very similar to this in it. A lot of the tracks are, especially the ones that I would pay attention, in particular the ones that have woodwinds, and note the kind of size roughly of his ensemble, especially the string players, and how few that there are in order to achieve that really light texture and have the winds kind of be of equal power to them, and the piano as well. So, that might be a score just to listen to, or transcribe it. I actually just listened to it and transcribed a lot of it myself because it's such a light texture. It's really not that hard to transcribe it. So I would think about that and think about, his balance, and then ask yourself whether you really want what size of string section you want there. Yeah. I think also in general, you could probably have maybe a few more expression and dynamic markings throughout. I think that would just, in real life would give more life to your score. The players are going to, be able to get more into it and shape it a little bit more. I mean, they'll do it if you have good players anyway, but it's always good to kind of show them what you want and not just let them kind of make it up themselves and rely on their own intuition. Yeah. I would caution that, like, too, that if you're gonna have a, this is just one track from a hypothetical sort of game, but I would caution from too much of like the same repeated pattern, what I'm not sure if I remember exactly what I think is A G, in the violins, right? A G G G A G G G for a very long time. So, if you're going to write something longer in this style, you might want to consider as also giving, a little bit more of interest to the different, players, and not having them just kind of do the same, note, right? And do that for a long time, because people will eventually, they won't tell you, but they'll eventually get tired of that. So just something to keep in mind for kind of larger things. Yeah, and maybe, you might think too about if you have a little bit longer track, maybe varying the harmony a little bit more instead of just kind of mostly being, that kind of repeated pattern of planing major ninth chords, or major chords, sus2, I guess it's how you're voicing it, which is not non-functional, but just kind of planing that. But you could maybe try and create a little bit more harmonic interest in something a little bit longer than this length of a track. I think it's effective here. The only other thing I would say is, you have the section that repeats or loops, depending how you want to think about it. And when you come out of it, you just have everyone end on, like, I think just a quarter note in that next measure, and then they drop out, and the piano starts the melody immediately right there. that felt a little abrupt to me. There are different ways you could approach it, but I think what you're going to find is if you don't give the player some kind of indication, to decrescendo or something, or provide some sort of break, or transition there, you're going to find, I think, that you're going to go from like a lot of volume to and covering up the beginning of the piano to nothing very quickly, and it might be a little bit jarring. I do like, though, that at the end, right after at that section, after the looped or repeated section, instead of having all the string players play that pattern, you just have the divided violas, and I think that a little bit lighter there, in terms of like raw sound, not like thickness of texture, but like in terms of raw sound. And I think that in some ways is maybe a little bit more effective and maybe a little bit closer to what you want if you don't have a small ensemble. If you have a large ensemble, I think that kind of thinner texture, just the violas and the piano playing your repeated chord pattern at the beginning, could be really effective. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff there, but I think it's a very well written track overall. I think the melody is very nice. I know you mentioned that it's a reference to some other theme that I'm just not familiar enough with video game themes to know what it is. But I think you've crafted really nice texture, really open texture, very clear texture, very good sense of drama within the track, and yeah, I think it's the kind of thing that could work pretty well overall in a game setting. Although I'm far from the expert on that sort of thing. So definitely keep up the good work, and I do really think that listening to some Desplat, especially Little Women, is be a good thing to help you think about size of ensemble and balance, and strings that are supposed to be light but also with like important melodic stuff in the piano and winds.
Yeah, I think that was extremely valuable, by the way. I'm always amazed when you go deep into it. Just a lot of like practical stuff, just a lot of good, just good advice. So, what's the person's name? I don't know if you said it earlier or.
I believe the person is Nick O'Brien.
Okay, well, congrats, Nick O'Brien, on finishing something that is good. I can't you can't understate how impressive it is when someone actually puts their mind to something and actually completes it. And I say that maybe I'm projecting because I have that problem all the time. But
completing things is so hard.
Yeah.
Someone gave a comment in the live chat from Leroy Jenkins, who says, "What video game is it in? What video game is it in reference to?" I didn't hear that part. I'm not sure. The composer on Reddit and their description of it said that it's in reference to something. It's just something like bonus points if you know what it's a reference to. So I don't get the bonus points.
There's a link in the chat actually with the YouTube video, so if you want to check it out and see if you can guess the video game link, and you come back and you tell us, that's bonus points for you. Because I'm curious to know as well if it's like I couldn't, whatever it was, I definitely didn't catch it the first pass through, and I'm also not the most well versed in video game music for sure. So yeah, but that's cool. Oh yeah, and I had this random thought while you were talking. I was like, what if Nathan gave you some like video game music suggestions to look over or something like that? Like I think there's some more like some things that come to mind immediately are like the Halo soundtrack is very well loved. I have not listened to it in, I don't know, I don't remember it at all, so I couldn't comment on it personally. But like there's stuff like that, so it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on those things.
Yeah, if he wants to give me some recommendations, I'll definitely listen to them. So
Yeah, for sure. Cool. And so, yeah, everyone can check out, I can't remember the name again, but you can check out this person's work in the link in the description. If you're listening in post, the link will definitely be there. If you are live right now, it's in the live chat. So if you want to check it out, go give them a like. Tell them that you heard it on this podcast too, so that they know that we did this for them. And also, if you really like it and you want to share it amongst different communities, share their stuff. If you like stuff, give it love. Don't go come across things you love and then just pass through them and not give someone who could use a little arm up, a little arm up, just by hitting the like button or something like that.
yeah, I've been I subscribe to all the different links for every one I've reviewed so far on our show, and I've kept track of the different things they put out. So
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, perfect. See, Ben's putting in the work. Hit the like button. Yeah, but that's cool. All right, next segment then. Cool. So I'll so if you guys aren't familiar, oh hey, it's Nathan in the chat. Yo, what's up? I don't know if he's distracting himself from studying. Maybe you should go back to studying. No, just kidding. But yeah, so if you're new to the podcast, what we do here live is we record the entire week's worth of episodes right here in one sitting. Sometimes that can take a good amount of time. But what we do is we separate these out into different segments so that if you're interested in music, you're interested in whatever you're interested in, you can look at the title and have more idea of what exactly you want to consume. And it looks like you guys like that, so we've kept that up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reintroduce the podcast real quick, and then we'll be off to the races again with Arguing with Reddit. Or actually, Ben, do you want to reintroduce the podcast since I did last time?
sure. So welcome to Mixed Media. We have already heard from me. I reviewed a piece by Nick O'Brien on from a composer I found on Reddit, and his track Sunshine and Lasers. And we are going to be hearing from Irving, responding to hot takes from the internet.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just pull from the hat. So these are randomly taken. I haven't even seen the ones. Usually we pick for each other. We'll each pick one, and one for ourselves as well. So we'll have 3 hot takes. Since Nathan's not here, I had my producer wife, pull 2 for me. So I have not seen any of them, and I have no idea what they are. So here's to live reacting. Let's see what comes up first. Oh, that's not it. That's the music from last time. Okay, here it is. So this one says, as a film lover, Citizen Kane was the most incredibly boring film I have ever seen and does not deserve the praise that it gets. Ooh, so I'll say something, first before anyone calls me herd mentality or anything like that. I actually, with these classic films, I don't really go into them expecting much. I don't have a particular affinity to really any era in film. I think there are little golden nuggets in every era practically. I think maybe our current era is my least favorite. But besides that though, I'm not very particular in that sense. So this is not going to come from a place of it's classic, therefore I must defend it. But I will defend it because it's an amazing film. So I don't know. I mean, if you don't like character studies, I think you would definitely not like this film. So I could understand that. Let's read their reasoning. So they say, I think it's only famous for how much it did for the film industry at the time. If you're considering watching it, you're not missing out on much. It is incredibly dull and basically nothing happens. If you enjoyed it, good for you. Yeah, so I disagree entirely because I also have this problem with films that are notorious, meaning that they did something really great for film, but it doesn't really hold with the test of time. Some of Hitchcock feels a little bit like that. The ones I didn't like as much, and and you can see, okay, great, with like something like the birds, clearly this is important for VFX and practical effects and what can be done. And I mean, it does a pretty good job for what it is capable of doing. And this whole thing about sulfur photography, that's really cool. If you look look at how they were able to film the birds and isolate them and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, cool stuff. But like in terms of the film itself, I feel like it fell flat. And I'm not the kind of person who factors in the importance of it as much as I do really just how much does it, how much do I like it, how good do I think it is, independent of that, right? So yeah, so with Citizen Kane, I disagree in the sense that I really don't think anything about this film is particularly, and I'm also not the most familiar with the history of the film. Although I did watch Mank, which is about the history of the film, but that film is terrible. That film is, oh, not good, not good. So I'm not sure how much I should rely on that knowledge. Um, but with this film, I think I really love the character explorations. The most interesting thing, it very much so reminds me of a little bit There Will Be Blood in the way that it explores the character. Very much so not letting you in anywhere, but more so communicating from outside the character, which I really like. It makes you really focused on every line, every piece of delivery that's coming across the screen, particularly from Orson Welles, who smashes it out of the park. Absolutely phenomenal performance. And the photography is freaking gorgeous. I don't even know what to say about the photography other than, I mean, just, I don't know if you're a film fan or not, but if you are, go back and just look at some of the frames and what implied meanings there are in motion, in set work, in transition, in like every aspect. This is the exact kind of cinematography that I fall in love with, which is everything about the picture is telling a story, on their own in some ways, but also in conjunction with each other, creating this very beautiful picture. Even as simple as this one thing that sticks in my mind is the scene. It's one of the climactic scenes, so I won't really talk about the exact details, but the camera pans over, following the character, and you think it's just doing, tracking, right? Like you think it's just following the action, and it looks like that because it's been following this character, and we've been holding on the shot for a while. And then the actress, this is good blocking as well, good directing. The actress takes a little step back further than you normally would get, and we pan a little bit farther, and then there's this on the lower left side of the screen. At that moment, where the script needed that kind of image, there's a doll. It's perfect. So I won't explain the meaning of that, but that kind of filmmaking is stuff that I really love. So I kind of disagree, and I don't think that's because I expected it to be, something, incredible. I think it's deservedly well loved. I wouldn't put it in my top. Three probably, but for me personally, but I can see how people could, definitely. So disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, when I watched it, I didn't watch it with, an eye for all those details like you did, because I can't do that. But yeah, I don't know. I really enjoy it. I don't think it's boring at all. Personally, I mean, I was quite interested in the development of the main character and figuring out, I mean, also just like on a really basic, level, my, non filmmaker appreciation, but like the way it opens is what creates this interest, right? Like you're at the end already at the beginning, and then you want to see how you get from the basically the end of the story, how you get to the end of the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's this like little, like it's just I think it's a great exercise in writing and directing and cinematography, just everything coming together to make this really beautiful thing. One thing also I forgot to mention about it is the writing I've been talking about writing a lot, but the structure is very much so whatever it needed to be for the story. So the the structure is made for the story instead of the story made for the structure, right? Which is a big mistake a lot of people make, especially in today's cinema. It's very obnoxious. You can feel the story being crammed into a structure, right? But in this case, the structure arises from the story instead. However many acts the story needed was however many acts. I don't remember. I didn't watch it like going end of act. So I don't remember how many acts, but I have a feeling there are a lot of acts in this film, like maybe upwards of 7 or something like that, or it might be something like that if I went back and looked at it. But just the back and forth, and I won't bore you. Maybe I'll make a whole episode about it because I watched it rather recently. So I'll make an episode about Citizen Kane and what I loved about it. I'll probably buy it on Blu-ray. I watched it in the cinema, which was great. Asterisk audio system was freaking out, but whatever. So yeah. Next take here. Let's see what we've got. So I think this one's from Ben. Can't read it right now, but Ben, do you want to give me an overview?
Yeah, so actually, let me pull it up myself too. But this is from a thread saying, asking for people to list their, what are the most Oscar bait films out there. And there were some, interesting takes all around. I think the consensus is this movie, I don't even know, called Crash. It's like the biggest Oscar bait film of all time. Again, I've never seen it. I've never heard of it. Apparently it's from 2005. I don't know. But I thought this was an interesting take. So this person says, every Best Picture winner from the 80s besides Platoon was Oscar bait that worked. Amadeus is a masterpiece, but still sort of falls into Oscar bait. Terms of Endearment is bait that isn't too pretentious. Everything else is an oof. In particular, Ordinary People and Out of Africa, read for just swinging through the fences in those. Driving Miss Daisy is straight, make old white people feel good trash. I'll throw Sophie's Choice in with these. It didn't win Best Picture, but I think it's quite similar, and it's sort of embarrassingly naked in its attempt to seem profound. Basically indicting all of the Best Picture Oscar films from the 80s. I can speak to none of them. I've never seen any of these films, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care about the Academy enough to remember like what won and when and exactly, but I know what this person's talking about, and I agree with it mostly. I would think. I think. Well, I agree with it. Asterisk. I think the biggest thing is that not the whole cadre tends to be like that. Every year, there might be like one or two that are a little bit different. Do they tend to win? No. I think I covered this in the Oscars episode that we did a long time ago for the last Oscars. If you go check that out, I think I read from an article that describes the exact parameters that are required if you want to be the most perfect Oscar bait movie, and it's extremely accurate. Like, I mean, you could basically formulate, many films around just following the structure and then hopefully executing it very well. Right? Of course, you're going to need that part, but yes, I think that's very upsetting because it's kind of boring. Like, there's the types of films that you tend to be films that don't necessarily resonate with people who are outside of the Academy. I'm going to use Mank as the example. Like, that's an Academy film. Like,
I will see. There's a lot of people mentioning Mank as well in the thread.
You couldn't get a more Oscar bait movie than Mank, right? It's got everything. It's got the story of its creation, like how Mank came to be, which is David Fincher. This was his passion project for so long. He's had the script forever, and he finally got. Okay, there's some weirdo in the chat that needs to. I thought I blocked this person, but Maybe Nathan can nuke this person for me if he's still around. There's some weirdo in the chat. You're not allowed to spam. No promoting weird stuff. All right. Anyway, and don't click on spam stuff. I don't know. The fact that people do this kind of stuff tells me that at least somebody will click on weird stuff and get their life destroyed. So don't do that. Anyway. So what was I saying? So yeah, so Mank, it has the story of its creation that's like, oh my gosh, like, David Fincher spent his... I respect that, by the way. I actually really like David Fincher's work. I think this work is particularly terrible, though. So, and it has the sort of pretentious air around it that really isn't in a lot of other... Actually, isn't in at all in any other David Fincher film, which is kind of bizarre. When I was watching it, it just didn't feel like him. Didn't feel gritty and down to earth like he usually does. Thank you, Nathan, for nuking this person. And so there's that, and then there's the fact that there's like a name, actors in there with big names. So it's Gary Oldman, and he's been around Hollywood forever, and everyone wants to give him an Oscar, that kind of thing. And Gary Oldman did a good job for what he was given. So yeah, I mean, he did a really great job, I would say, for what he was given. I don't think the film was bad because of him whatsoever. And so it has all the ingredients. Oh, it's got what did I forget? The political overtones that were just so heavy-handed that it made me feel like I was watching like a Twitter representation of reality unfold before me on the screen, which I was just like, oh, I was really relieved to find that every other Oscar film wasn't like that. I was scared. That was the first Oscar film I watched from last year, and I was really scared that every film was going to be like that. And I was like, oh, Lord, help me through these, oversimplifications of life happening from people who are clearly out of touch with it. So, that kind of appeals to the Academy. So yeah, if you're out there, Academy, watching this, and I'm up for an Oscar in the future, just ignore everything I said and give me the Oscar anyway. So, there you go. I don't think that'll happen, but I don't think I care enough. So yeah, I agree with it somewhat. I think it's kind of boring. Like Moonlight, yeah, that's it. I don't think Moonlight was created like that. I wouldn't say that, but I would say that it fits the mold extraordinarily well. It lacks a few things in the list, if I can remember the list. Black Mass I have not seen. So yeah, I would agree with this take. All right, next one here. Oh, that's huge. Let me fix that. So this one says, of course, producer wife would pick this one. I'll tell you the backstory, but it says, sometimes watching a film or reading a book after a spoiler makes it better. The reason this is here is because this is what Steph says sometimes, and it drives me insane. So she probably wants to hear me rant a little bit. I think per art form it matters, right? So like it matters in the art form where the spoilers matter. I've thought about this way too much, by the way. I'll probably do a mixed media on it, so I won't go on too long. But whether it matters depends on the art form. Film is sequential, okay? You literally line up frames one after another for sequence purposes. When you edit something, you edit it in the order that you want information and other things to be exposed to the audience. I think it's a little bit, whatever. I'll just be all out with my opinion. I think it's somewhat disrespectful if you're, sort of, unless you don't intend on watching something or you don't really care about it, I'll read stuff if I don't think I'll ever watch it or something like that. But in terms of like, if you want to go into the film, watching it as intended, films are built around sequence, right? So if you're watching it as intended, you won't spoil yourself, right? So you end up not watching the film as it was intended to be watched. And so you'll never get that experience back, right? You only get that the first time you watch it. It's an interesting thing, and then there's like the rewatchability and all that, but like the first time you watch a film, that's the native format of the film. First time in a theater is the native format of the film. And I promise you, I'm not weird about that. That directors definitely feel that way. almost guaranteed. I would say maybe there's some genre things that might also play into there, like if it's like a campy, I'm thinking I don't know why Scary Movie comes into my head, but Scary Movie, does it really matter as much? I don't know. I would still say I would not want to know anything about it, in terms of important details. But yeah, what's your opinion, Ben, on this one?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure I can't really think of a time where I've had something like spoiled for me and then I've gone on to see it. And I'm not sure it would make it better, but like there are some things that are unavoidable. Like it'd be very hard today, unless you're like a kid who's never seen any, Star Wars film, and your parents have sheltered you from well, the big surprise in Empire Strikes Back, which for the sake of us, I won't say what it is, but I mean, obviously everyone listening knows, right?
Right.
I mean, so you can't avoid it, right? And in that case, I mean, it's probably not better, but like it's unavoidable. So other things like, well, I certainly know what's going to happen in certain, like, sometimes you can figure out what's going to happen without even having to have seen it. I mean, you could get, and to be fair, I haven't seen many Marvel films. I've seen like 5 or 6 of them, maybe. Yeah, I think 5. But like just knowing a few details about how things go, I mean, like I could have given you a reasonable guess about who was going to die in, an Endgame or whatever. And do I certainly I know now, like, would that if I ever choose to watch that, would that like kill the film for me? Probably not. But would it make it better? Probably not.
Yeah. In terms of like what you're responsible for, in terms of avoiding information, that's a different thing. I think like you said, like there's certain things you just can't avoid. It's more like, are you going to purposely like go and read the synopsis on Wikipedia or something like that? Like that, I think is like somewhat disrespectful. Unless you don't intend on watching it or you really don't care about it, right? And which I think is a strong statement. If you were to imagine yourself saying that, I'm not saying that you have this responsibility to any of the filmmakers or anything like that. I'm not trying to be weird about it, but like, imagine you saying to a filmmaker, I'll just read the synopsis and maybe I'll like, it's like, the person will likely say to you, that's not how that's not how this works, so yeah, that's my opinion. But yeah, I'll probably rant about it in some long mixed media episode or something and give you 10 reasons why you should never do this, and then then you can feel bad about your life. Just kidding. Cool. And we have one last one because we have a short episode today since it's only the two of us. This one is, let's see, Quentin Tarantino films aren't that good. Ooh, that's a hot take. That's definitely a hot take. I don't think Tarantino movies are as good as people say. The plot is usually nonsensical, and the climax is disappointing or wildly unrealistic. His feel-good vision for history is misinformation and leads to poor understanding of the real events and their consequences to the world. Also, they're too gory, but I understand that's not unpopular to most people. This somehow, 12 days ago, got 286 likes, which I think is perplexing, and 74% uploaded. I would love to know what subreddit this came from to get that good of a ratio, which, kind of surprises me. Quentin Tarantino is one of those directors that doesn't have a very high latitude for filmmakers who like him. So, like, what I'm saying is a lot of different kinds of filmmakers like Tarantino. And the reason is that he's extremely accessible in a lot of different ways. Both to the audience and to like film lovers and to filmmakers. He's got this very unique style and genre that is very hard to replicate. I've seen a lot of people try, and usually it just feels like a replication of Tarantino. And so I love Tarantino films. I think they are underratedly gorgeous. Like, I think that's one of the most underrated parts of Tarantino, because people are so focused on the witty dialogue and the funny scenes and like the crazy gore and all that kind of stuff. But like the visuals are always ridiculously beautiful. So shout out to his DP and all that kind of stuff too. So yeah, I'll take this apart one by one. So the fact that they're unrealistic is kind of bizarre of a thing to say. This is cinema. Welcome to cinema. Things are unrealistic very often. When you tell stories, they don't have to be real stories. I can tell you that even the stories that you think are realistic are not probably realistic in the, perfect sense. I mean, you could even take a film like Saving Private Ryan, which is, has high historical accuracy and is a historical fiction, and you could probably tear it to pieces if you wanted to, a la CinemaSins, which I think is a tragedy when people do that kind of stuff to films and say, look, it's not. Well, stories and art in general are supposed to be, or I should say, art in general, right? You have to interpret in its context or what it's supposed to be doing for you, right? You don't want to go in and read a textbook thinking it's going to be an adventure fiction, right? You're never going to like the textbook, right? That's a weird example. I don't know why that came to my mind. But if you come to Tarantino expecting like a hyper-realistic or somewhat, realistic film, this is definitely not the director for you. It's very over the top. He literally has a movie called Pulp Fiction, and you could just interpret everything he makes after that or before everything he's ever made as a type of Pulp Fiction, because that's really what it is. So I disagree with that. And then this person says, his feel-good version of history is misinformation and leads a poor understanding of the real events. Okay, well, if you're looking at Tarantino for a proper historical understanding of history, I think you're going to the wrong place. I wouldn't really suggest that if you're going to try to learn historical facts that you watch films at all. Maybe even, I can even think of examples that people give as like, oh, look at this thing that's from this era, that's a story. It's still not the best way if you want like the pure factual firsthand evidence sort of understanding of what's going on. Tarantino likes history a lot, obviously. He's particularly obsessed with the history of Hollywood, of course. And so, if you're not into that, if you think he looks at everything with rosy eyes, I think he does too, but I think it's a purposeful cartoonish romanticism. It's not like it's not like he's saying everything was great. I mean, okay, take Django Unchained. This is a perfect example. Literally in the time of slavery, right? I think it might still have the record for the most N-words in a film, right? So pretty extreme case here that we're talking about. Definitely makes light of the era. Definitely does. And I think that the difference between what he's doing there and someone who's actually being disrespectful or actually misinforming you is he's not asking you to accept what's happening in that film as historically accurate. He's asking you to accept it as a fun revenge movie, right? Where a former slave goes slaying a whole bunch of, racist slave owners. That's what he's asking you to accept through the film, and it's freaking amazing. And also a gorgeous film. So, yeah, I disagree with this take. I think this person has a very narrow view coming to films and probably should, open up a little bit to the films and ask yourself, what are they trying to do? So there's that.
We have a question, Irving, in the chat from Stephanie Costello, referring to the previous take about spoilers. And she wants to know about movies, particularly, that are kind of like a commonly redone story, and whether that, knowing, I guess, knowing, what's going to happen, does that spoil your enjoyment of that sort of film? She gives the example of Little Women and the multiple versions of Little Women, including the one I referenced earlier?
Yeah, it's a very good. That's a very good question. I like that question. I think the difference though is when you're remaking a classic, you tend to well, it depends on the cultural atmosphere, right? It depends on whether that classic has gone out of favor in terms of the public consciousness. It depends on whether that classic is like a basically a household story, like Batman, right, or something like that. And the difference I would say is that usually when you're remaking a classic, you have that in mind, that cultural atmosphere that you're in mind, and so you usually come at it from that direction. So if I'm making another Batman film, I know very likely everyone's going to know the backstory of Batman, right? And everyone's going to come to the movie with that in mind. So I'm going to write it that way, and I'm going to make it that way, with that in mind, right? I'm making this film for, my particular cultural context, in my particular cultural context. So I think that filmmakers tend to have that in mind, and you can actually feel it a lot of times too when they're relying on your back knowledge of something. What's a good example of this? Joker. Joker is a good example of this. Joker is assuming you know everything about everything about the mystique of the character Joker, and it doesn't tell. It's called Joker, but there's no reference to the comics whatsoever throughout the entire film, right? It's expecting you to apply your understanding of the Batman universe to what's happening in front of you to create that sort of interesting thing. I think if you watch that movie without knowing anything about the Joker character in general, or about Batman, or about the themes that it's exploring that have been, traditionally explored in the comics, then you'll be very confused about what's going on in there. So I don't think it's much of a spoiler as it is just the context that you're in, and then filmmakers will adjust to that. And obviously, it's not your fault if you know the cultural story or anything like that. And I think it would be more of a spoiler if you then took that and then you read the synopsis for that particular rendition of it, right? That filmmaker may want to flip something or do something interesting, subvert something. Yeah. Yep.
But so. In that case, though, would it maybe that's a case where knowing something would make the film better, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you could put it that way. I guess when I think of spoilers, I think of it more as particular to the instance, right? And I think about it more in terms of what the filmmaker expects you to not know going in, right? If it's like assumptions about particular things, then yeah, I would agree that's not a spoiler. The filmmaker is literally assuming that you'll know that going in. Another good example is Tarantino film, the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't know that much about that. I actually know a lot more for completely unrelated reasons about that era of Hollywood than I did when I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So when I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that film went right over my head, like practically in almost like every way possible. And the reason why is because he wrote it for people who love that era and know a lot about that era. I consequently didn't really like the film that much, and I think the assumption was a little bit strong that people would know that much about that era. But now looking back at it, now that I know a lot more about that era, I see what he was doing with the film, and I'm like, oh, I see, I get it now, right? So in that sense, that information would have been made the film better, knowing what the history was behind that film. Yeah, cool. Is that it? Or is there another thing? Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, so those are my my reactions to your hot takes. I really love these this week. They were nice and spicy, I think. So if you see this afterwards, if I happen to go back and respond to you with a link, none of what I said was supposed to be mean or anything like that. I just feel strongly about film, and you can disagree with me. I would love to hear your hot takes in the comments, or wherever you want to send them. I'm pretty much guaranteed to respond to them next time if you send them in, because I love creating that kind of dialogue. Cool. That's it for me. All right, so I guess news. Is there any news in the music world?
Um, I think the biggest thing in the media music world the past, well, I guess it was this past Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, was the John Williams concert conducting the Berlin Philharmonic. Which
Oh, you know who went to that?
no.
Nuno went to that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he sent me a picture from the seats. He's a friend of ours. Uh, yeah, he showed me a picture. I was like, whoa, I didn't even know that was happening. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's kind of been in a lot of headlines as being billed as a pretty historic event, which I suppose it is. I mean, the Berlin Philharmonic is kind of, generally considered the best orchestra in the world, one of those, bastions of European high culture, and not so much in the um, popular music world. If you guess, film music seems like popular music to certain people. So, that it was billed as a historic event. Lots of people, were making lots of orchestra members making comments about how John Williams' music inspired them to become musicians. And anyway, so that's kind of a big thing. Obviously, I wasn't in Berlin to see that. Um, yeah, so that's kind of significant. Um, Other than that, basically some recent releases, a lot of Zimmer music, of course, because I think the Dune soundtrack is released today, just like the film came out midnight, I guess. And No Time to Die is, of course, the number one film
Hmm.
track right now, number one selling film score. Um, for understandable reasons, I suppose. I haven't heard it, so I can't comment on it. It'll be one that I feel like you kind of have to watch the film. I've heard some very mixed things about the score for it, from typical praise for all things Zimmer to people thinking that its highlights are really great and its rest of it is not so good. So I can't speak to it yet. But I'd like to see the film at some point and hear. That's one I don't want to listen to a soundtrack first. I think the soundtrack has to go with the picture in that one.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's interesting. Has it gotten into Harry Potter territory where everything is just kind of the same one theme for the entire film? Or I actually have not seen any Bond film, so that's a strange fact about me.
Yeah, so I don't. Um, I haven't seen like too many. I think I watched the first two Daniel Craig ones. So like Casino Royale, and then what's the one after that? I can't think of the name of it. So that was like 2007 or something. So I haven't seen any of the recent ones. Um, so I'm really not sure how things have gone musically in the franchise since then. I thought those scores were a little bit less, musically interesting than the classic Barry scores. Um, but that's my opinion. I understand that Zimmer has in this score for No Time to Die has a ton of quote, people like to say that they're subtle nods to Barry's various themes. I don't know how subtle they are or not, if everyone's commenting on them, but so I don't know.
True, true. A little paradox. Yeah. And Nathan says in the chat, since he's not here, but he's filling us in on some gaming news. He's saying that Among Us is finally coming to Xbox and PlayStation. So if you want to hop on the Among Us bandwagon, like, I don't know, 3 years later, or however long since the peak fad, you can go ahead and get on that on Xbox
Oh,
or PlayStation.
Yes, my Stephanie Costello points out another piece of news that I forgot. Leslie Bercuse, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, died the other day. And he's not someone that I had ever heard of. And I was reading a lot about him recently, and I know even a lot of other significant people in the industry, hadn't worked with him. He was mostly a lyricist for a lot of film things. So he did write some of the songs for James Barrie's Bond scores, amongst many other things in his career.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, not cool that he died. Rest in peace. Cool. So for film news, let's see. So one thing that I've been excited about lately is that that Sony just announced the A7 IV, which is if you are a content creator or an indie filmmaker, that might be a great camera for you to look at. I've been anticipating this camera for, I don't know, a year and a half now, in terms of adding to my my gear set as something that's a little bit more content creator oriented, but has a good balance of things. And I think they really struck the precise things I needed. So you should check that out if you're looking at that. I anticipate that if you want to get the camera, you're either going to have to pre-order it or decide whether or not you want that camera fairly soon, because Sony has already said that there's going to be issues with shipping and issues with supply and all that kind of stuff because of the same supply chain issues that we've been seeing for a while now. So the price, what I'm saying is the price may go through the roof, if you wait like 6 months from launch or something like that. And it may not even be available, past pre-orders. I have no idea. So I'm like sitting in my seat like, what do I do? Because I'm not 100% sure that I'll buy the camera yet. So there's that. There's if you haven't heard, we were talking about it in the Discord earlier today, but the DP for, I forget the film's name. Rust, yes. I remember it was a one word. I was like, Dune, it's not Dune, it's Rust. It was Rust, yeah. Unfortunately died on set. Rest in peace as well to her. From something I just honestly can't understand how it happened, because there's an egregious, I don't know. I would love to hear the details come out, because someone needs to be sued into the ground and or brought up on criminal negligence charges, because I don't really understand how something like this happens. And also, sure, it's not very fun for Alec Baldwin right now either. So yeah, to all those people, shout out to y'all. So yeah, there's that bit of news. If you want to join the conversation, we're in the Discord. I think that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else on my list for film news. Cool. So thank you for this first episode of us streaming on Rumble. It's exciting. If you want to know where to find us on Rumble, if you would like to follow us on there, the link is in the description, as always, as is the link to practically everything you possibly want from us, whether it's our email, whether you want to follow us on Instagram. It's gonna be great, because I'm anticipating, I'm literally going to dedicate maybe a week and a half to really slamming on really bringing both the production quality and the reach of this podcast up. Like, I mean, literally, I've finally offloaded my schedule, and I'm literally going to spend 8 hours a day, on this podcast for maybe a week or so. So follow us before the blow up happens, of course. And also, shout out again to Rob Sharma for making this possible by following us by supporting us for $5 a month on mixedmedia.locals.com. For $5 a month, you get a whole bunch of perks. I've detailed them in the last episode, so I won't go through everything. If you go simply to the link in the description, you'll see everything, including access to this whiteboard, which will be a limited time thing because obviously we don't want 100 people, drawing on this whiteboard at the same time. So, you want to be first in on the ability to draw on this live whiteboard here. It doesn't get utilized enough. So if you're a drawer or you love art or anything like that, you can go ahead and doodle or make fun of us or meme on us or whatever you want while we're talking on that live whiteboard. We love the interaction. Shout out to everyone who showed up today as well. We love to see it. So thank you for stopping by and spending a few hours with us on Mixed Media Live.
Yep, thanks for listening.
See you next week.